Okay, welcome to today's community call, everybody. Today we're going to be discussing strategic financial planning, scenario planning, and giving you guys some ideas of what you can think about as you're developing your recovery and rebuilding plans, and even your just business continuity plans. Um, as always, I'll start with a quick Zoom tutorial for any new folks on the call. Cover some of our basic ground rules, and then today we're honored to have a bunch of panelists with us to discuss just to discuss these issues from their perspectives and what they're doing in their organizations. Um, with Zoom, we'll have a short question and answer period at the end of this call, so feel free to start dumping in questions into the question and answer tool, which you'll find on the lower right-hand side of the center controls on your call. If you see a question that's already been asked that is also on your mind, just go ahead and upvote it rather than typing in a question secondarily. There's also a chat function on the lower left part of those center controls. And you can either chat with the panelists directly, or in the little drop-down list, just select all panelists and attendees to chat with everybody. That's a great way to make any comments that aren't actual questions. So questions go in the question and answer box. Any comments or other conversations can go into the chat. Once we move into that question and answer phase, if you have anything you'd like to say, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll unmute you and give you a chance to say that. And once you are unmuted, you'll see a little pop-up. Make sure you click unmute myself, and you'll be ready to start talking right away. Our ground rules, as always, are to be polite and respectful to all of our panelists, to keep any personal political commentary out of the conversation. And if you are unmuted and you have a chance to speak, just to keep your comments to 2 minutes or less, so that everyone has time to get their questions answered and to make any comments they'd like to make. Anyone who's abusive to other participants on this call will remove you to keep the conversation flowing smoothly. Our panelists today are four great gym owners from around the country. We have, in no particular order, Doug Cosby from Inner Peaks in North Carolina, Kristen Horwitz from The Pad and Ascent Ventures in California, Hillary Harris from Eva Rock and Fitness in Colorado and Maine, and Joel Graybeal from the Triangle Rock Club in North Carolina and Virginia. So without further ado, we'll jump right into this discussion here. I think I'll probably stop sharing this dialogue so we can see all of our panelists as they make their comments, and you all kick off. So I thought the best way to start this conversation, and love to hear from our panelists on this, and really anyone out there who'd like to say anything, go ahead and raise your hand at any time and enter those questions and answers anytime. But the first topic, which is the one that's constantly on everyone's mind, of course, is all of these unknowns in the world. And we all have historical records in our businesses and organizations to rely on. So I'd like to just start some of those unknowns. And so with the panelists here, how do you go about for your own organizations relying on your history and using your history to shape your vision of the future?
You want me to jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we're relying on is going back to, past financials, so that as opposed to, guessing, we're going back and using historical records for, all of our expenses at all gyms, and then translating those and figuring out under various scenarios, of what I'm calling an impeded opening, how might we run? What's going to be an impact to membership revenue, what's the impact to programs, day passes, retail, etc. And then running, and I haven't done this yet, so we're in the process of doing it, but taking historical data, ratcheting it down to accommodate sort of the new operating environment or the business operating environment that we'll all be in. And then running out some scenarios. I'm going to do it month by month. We know which of our debt servicing payments, lease payments, what's deferred for how long, etc. I'm going to load up those for every month that we have, and then run sort of worst case, maybe a medium case, and a best case scenario on what this forecast will look like. Because the name of this game right now is all of us to survive. And I think the way we survive is by keeping as much gas in the tank as we possibly can, because we don't know what our eventual burn rate's going to be for the gas, and we don't know how long we're going to need to run on this gas in the tank until we get some back to some normalcy. So my scenario or thinking is plan for the worst and hope for the best, but be prepared for sort of an ugly worst case scenario, and see if we can build a plan that gets us out 12 months and getting us through this thing.
Thanks, Joel. You had made an interesting comment on this call a couple days ago on Tuesday, Kristen, in regards to looking at this almost like day one of launching your business. Yeah, it'd be great to have you expand on that a bit.
So I was thinking about this while Joel was talking, and one of the things that influences how I run my business and why I'm probably a bit more Pollyanna than other people is we also run events, like outdoor human-powered events. We got really known for adventure races. And when you run an event, and they're very expensive. It's just like opening a climbing gym. So, we'd run a 24-hour race. It was going to cost us 60 grand, and we hoped that enough people would show up. And as they don't show up, I'm really used to being able to be like, okay, so we're going to cut that. Okay, so we're going to do that. So the thing that I do is I've spent so much time trying to do projections that I don't think it's necessarily worth the energy of trying to run. Like I have this immense spreadsheet with probably 10 tabs on it that show you like cash flow and show you like fixed costs, and it's all dialed in where I can plug it in. And I could sit there and spend a lot of time on it, but because so much is so questionable right now, I'm in a position where I'm looking at it sort of paramedic method. Like, what's the worst case scenario? Rationalize that through, and then go, okay, which pieces are not true and which ones are? And then what I'm basically doing is looking at it from, cool, so here's what our worst case scenario is. Can we survive on that? Cool. And then I'm going to allow myself to be surprised. And then as we continue to, maybe I'll be surprised in that there's less money, which I hope not, because I'm pretty conservative. My guess is we'll be surprised that there's more money and more activity, and then we'll be able to open stuff up. But I'm trying really hard to run it like an event, if you will, because I feel like that's like a startup, right? You don't know how many people are going to show up. I tried to do a survey on Climbing Wall or the climbing business operators to see what the R curves are for people's growth and whether they had too small or too big. And I think that I have a pretty good idea of it, but the reality is we don't have a good idea because there's so many factors. So when you open up a gym, you don't really know how it's going to go. One gym could be too big for its area, could be too little, it won't have the things. So this is the same thing. And so if you're comfortable because you've been running a certain way and you expect it that way, I can understand where there's a lot of fear. But especially for those people who are super small, you're also super mobile. So just my approach is like, okay, great. We're going to open like we've not been open until this point, except we're going to open with really well-trained people. We know what's coming. And then obviously we're going to open with members, which is cool, instead of having to do pre-sale, and go from there and see what the demand is and what people need, and then just continue to adapt.
Great. To expand on that a little bit, just looking at my notes here. So Joel had mentioned he's looking at like a worst, middle, and best case scenario. Do you take that approach for yourself, Kristen, at all, or is it really a more reactive view that you're taking for this?
Like I said, that magic spreadsheet of mine, I can literally put in like actuals versus projections. So I like when our membership went down 50% the first month. So I typed in negative 50% into what the group, because our models are based off of how many members we have. So it recalculates it. Yeah. So I can sit there and go, okay, look, I think in May, if we're still closed, it's going to probably drop another 12%. And then in June, when we open, we'll probably jump 25%. But I pick the most conservative numbers, so that way, like he said, you keep gas in the tank, and you can always, lucky for us, because I worked real hard, and I think I had the magic whatever, but we got our idle loan. So I have our cash, and we had cash for investments for projects we were working on. So we're in a pretty good spot where we're like, okay, cool. the worst case scenario is this, and then when we find out that it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be, then sweet, now what do we do? And that's the approach I like to keep, and I think that's probably why I'm Miss Sparkly, because I'm always surprised happily. And I think that that can be a really good way to deal with this, instead of being pessimistic necessarily, but be like, cool, that's what's going to happen. How am I going to react to that? And then you can react to everything that's not bad in a positive way, because I'm not a planner. I've been very successful in that we say, this seems like it's going to work. Oh crap, it's not working. Time to pivot. And so if you're not that person, my method's probably not going to work for you. But like me spending hours and hours crunching numbers and trying to think of every scenario, I realized it wasn't going to serve. And it was just spending a lot of energy and a lot of like stress that wasn't useful during this time.
Yeah, I think that you can get into analysis paralysis for sure. And you know, you can sit there and create scenarios for days on end, and it doesn't really mean anything until you start to implement it. But I do think that there's values of creating scenarios, and to Kristen's point, it's good to be really conservative in your projections, because then you can be pleasantly surprised. And one of the things that I like to do, and I think Joel mentioned something along these lines, is that, you know, in thinking about the short term, I always think about like, okay, it's like putting gas in your tank, right? Like you just have to get to the next gas station. It's not about like, okay, I'm going from New York to California, and how on earth am I going to get there? It's like, how on earth am I getting to the next gas station so then I can get to the next place? And so with that mindset, it makes it a lot easier to think about, because otherwise it's really easy to get overwhelmed and feel like, you know, you don't know the answers. But I feel empowered when I create scenarios, because it gives you a sense of a better understanding of kind of like how you can react in those scenarios. So I like to do both. I created a really simple scenario table, and we're looking at not just keeping the business model the same, but looking at possibly changing the pricing structure. We haven't done it yet, but we've talked about saying, okay, well, maybe instead of just having, you know, a membership, a base membership, you run it more like, well, Orange Theory is a good example, where, you know, you can buy a membership and you're allowed to come in 4 times a month and it's X amount of dollars. And then you can buy one you come in and it's 6 times or 8 times, and then you can have unlimited. Because I think a lot of gyms right now are looking at having time slots to bring people in, and a reservation system instead of it being a free-for-all. And so we're looking at those various scenarios and like saying, okay, if the regulations are that you can only have 20 people at a time in your gym, then what does that mean? Like if we're running for X amount of hours and we have, say, 2-hour time slots, then what's the maximum amount of check-ins that we can get in a day? And then kind of backing into that, like figuring out, all right, so if we have 1,000 members, then what does that mean for them? Like how many check-ins per month are they going to be able to get, you know, with that limitation? And then saying, okay, well, what if we can have 50 people in the gym at a time? And then backing into it again. And so it's like, it's a very dynamic process. It's not static at all. And I think that in looking at the scenarios, you have to look at your pricing models, your schedules, your hours of operation. I mean, that's something else we're thinking about. Like, do we operate less hours? Do we operate more hours? I mean, do people, like, if you know, people are super psyched, but you can only bring in so many people in your gym, you know, are there people who want to come in at midnight? I don't know. I mean, these are all questions that I don't think that we've asked ourselves in the past, but I really encourage people to look at this as a startup and say, okay, can we create a completely different business model here? And in creating a different business model, I feel like that changes your mindset, and it puts you in a creative state of mind instead of a reactionary state of mind. Like, you know, we have to get out of this idea that, oh, well, we're just going to go back to business as normal. Like, what do we have to do to get back to the way it was? Like, I'm saying, no, we got to throw that out altogether. It's not going to be the way it was. So let's think more like a startup and get those innovative, creative juices going.
Can I jump on that real quick, Hillary? Because you told me you were thinking about that, and I was curious about what you meant by that. Now that I see that, one of the things that we're doing to plan is actually taking a step back, like you're saying, and saying, okay, look, what policies can we enact that are actually good for the business on the long term? But I think the most important thing is we also ran a survey. I mentioned this on Tuesday. We ran a survey and asked the members what's going to keep them from coming. So that, say we open and 70% of them are back tomorrow, but if we're like, we require masks, then we know that 20% won't come. So that kind of stuff. It allowed us to see that who we were as a character, and what we should or shouldn't do, and what models we should or shouldn't accept. It was simple. It was like 4 questions, but it was so clear to me. And so what I have directed my staff that's working on like policy setting and what we're going to do when we open, as well as me, is what's good for the company long run. So for example, my studio program, she's like, obviously we're not gonna be able to have packed yoga studios when we open. What if we did like semi-privates and we just had more of them? And I was like, brilliant. And what if we just keep that? And she's like, maybe we should mark our spots on the ground so we never overfill classes. And I was like, brilliant. Maybe we should do that. I really like it.
Yeah, I went around the yoga idea. I was thinking, why not do a hybrid? So if you can only fit 5 people in the studio, we're doing live stream yoga classes now, and we have some instructors that, I mean, they're getting 2-3 times the amount of people that they were before. So why not live stream the class, so you have like a few people in the actual class, but then you're live streaming it too. So there's that opportunity for the hybrid.
I just want to caution that when we talk about changing our business model, because I've watched it on climbing gym operators, people are like, well, let's totally change everything. This is never going to be the same. Do remember that it's a climbing gym and why people are attracted to it, and don't start to think about changing things just on a reaction. I'm not trying to tell Hillary that, because she knows. But for those of you out there who are like, I need to change everything. No, I don't. So.
Yeah, and the length of time that this might last is unknown at this point as well. So maybe making radical changes like that will put you in a hole, or give you just an amazing competitive advantage over other gyms, depending on how things play out. But it does seem like there will be some point in time that will look much more like normalcy of 6 months ago than what we're seeing right now. And you made a great comment about the blinders earlier, Kristen, and I think that's important to remember, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see it right at the moment. And having packed gyms and events will probably return one day. We just don't know how long that'll take to happen. How about your scenario planning, Doug? Are you guys running a number of scenarios? If so, like how many?
No, I think I'm probably following Kristen's lead more. We're winging it.
Yeah.
I do think a few things to emphasize. I think Kristen said it first, but whoever gets credit, we're all startups now. So we don't really know what happens when we open the gym. When I first opened in Charlotte, which wasn't my first gym, but it was still 22 years ago, we thought, wow, this is going to be great. We're going to have this huge membership base. All 50 people in Charlotte that were climbers joined, and then we said, oh, we're in big trouble. And then we started getting phone calls. Do you do birthday parties? Do you do birthday parties? Well, we weren't going to be a family kid birthday party gym, but we decided pretty quickly, yeah, we're going to do birthday parties. And in that first year or so, we probably had 55% of our business was groups. And now over the years, we've transitioned back to a member-based gym. But you need to be flexible. So I would also say when you first reopen, I would just leave as much flexibility as possible. Don't overcommit to things. We had this argument with our team yesterday or the day before, what our hours would look like on reopening, because I said, we need to start looking at staff levels and how many people we're going to retain in the near term, what that looks like. And we decided that we will definitely open with shorter hours day one, but day two, we might expand those hours. So be ready to grow into the demand as quickly as you can. And we know that we can fill the demand that we had 2 months ago. But we also know that there's almost no way we'll have that. There's no way we'll have that demand on day one of reopening. So we reopen small and we grow back to it as quickly as the market will bear.
Okay. So for Hillary and Joel, where it looks like you guys have built out or are in the process of building out some scenarios, how did you go about identifying your worst case scenario? And it looks like Kristen had done some surveying of her members to try to understand that. So that it seemed like that was your method, if I'm not putting words in your mouth, Kristen. How about for anyone else identifying that worst case scenario?
It's a wild ass guess. I mean, you hate to say it. It's, I mean, everything, this has happened to us. I mean, everything takes longer and everything costs more generally than what you hope and plan for. So we're trying to take the lessons that we've learned in the past and, just be as realistic as we can be. But I mean, we're all guessing. Is it 60% of your members coming back? Is it 40? Is it 80? And we're just trying to, make an educated guess on how things might be. And I mean, because there's no other data to go by because none of us have been through this. So we're just sort of, batten down the hatches, figure out how we, extend the cash that we have as long as we possibly can. Again, to Hillary's point, there's going to be another gas station hopefully coming up. But we're trying to, again, take the gas that we have in the tank and engineer a solution that takes us out as far as possible. And again, there's some serious guessing going on right now.
Yeah,
also,
I would.
Go ahead, Early.
I just wanted to touch on the whole cash is king subject here. I think we have to keep in mind that all gyms are different. Some people have a huge piggy bank and others don't. And also I think that there's a huge difference between large gyms and small ones. I think small ones can react a lot more quickly, while big ones have to plan out a lot more. But as far as like the cash conversation goes, and we'll probably get into this in a little bit, but the loans that are out there, the PPP loans and the assistant loans, can be looked at in a number of different ways. You can like take the approach of like, okay, I'm going to just spend it all and hope that the government is actually going to forgive me because they said they're going to forgive me, but I don't know if I believe that. Or you can say, all right, we're going to really just hang on to this cash and use it as a piggy bank and an emergency fund if we need it. But to that point, I think the worst case scenario in my mind is like, how long can you last if you don't open at all? Like, what if the coronavirus comes back and we can't open for months? Like, what if, I mean, that's like a totally gloom and doom scenario, right? Like, all right, we can't open all summer, or we open and in the fall we have to close again. And now we're faced with being closed for months and months again. So when I'm looking at those sorts of scenarios, I always like to look at the business model with benchmarks, and to say to myself, okay, am I in a healthy place right now? Am I hitting these benchmarks on my rent, on my payroll, on my admin and operations costs and my marketing? And where, if I'm not, like in this situation, it's probably like if you're keeping people on right now, your payroll percentage is probably through the roof, and so is your rent. But it's like a good place to say, okay, like I'm estimating that we're closed, for the whole summer, and we're going to have attrition on our members, but we're going to keep some of them engaged. So we have this really small number that's coming in, and then I have this much cash, and I'm going to say, all right, I want my burn rate to be X. Then if I'm looking at the benchmarks, I can use that benchmark as a negotiating point with my landlord or my bank. And I can say, look, if we want to stay afloat, we can only afford to pay this much rent for, this amount of time. And you have like some something to negotiate with, like a valid number, rather than just going blindly and talking to your landlord and saying, oh, please, just defer this loan. And hopefully they'll work with you, because landlords don't want to be repossessing climbing gyms.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd piggyback on that real quick, Garrett. So I think the scary thing is not the period that we're closed. It's going to be the period that we reopen.
Mm-hmm.
We can hunker down now. I've done that work. If I just get rid of all my employees and I maintain insurance on my buildings and I pay my mortgage, I've got enough cash to go a year and a half, 2 years, and hopefully the market responds and I can sell my buildings. We happen to have the position that we own the building, so we don't have to deal with the rent side of things. But then when we're opening with a negative cash flow, that's going to be the scary part, because then all of a sudden our cash burn could be a lot higher after we open than it is while we're closed. And I think that's what you really need to look at. So, coming back onto what Joel was saying about cash is king, and you want to have enough cash to be a startup again when you come out the other side. So you do want to think about that a bit. How much that is depends how fast we come back and what your burn rate is after you open. And I think you just have to adjust really quickly in those first few weeks until you figure out what that is. Oh gosh, only 10% of our members came back. We're in deep trouble. Or, oh wow, 90% of our members let us bill them. That's fantastic. Now we got some wiggle room.
Yeah, and I think this is a great segue into kind of the second half of this conversation here on some of the more technical points. So we were just talking about some of the fixed costs and fixed expenses, and payroll, rent, and insurance are probably the highest ones for everyone out there right now. Are there any other fixed expenses that you are keeping in I guess, a reverse gas tank scenario, that you're maintaining right now, but that you can cut if you have to? Or have you guys all pared everything down to bare bones?
I actually doubled down on making us efficient. We used to, my team always works from home, so we don't have like an office at the gym. And so, I went from one Zoom account to now we have 3 for coaches. We have one for yoga. And then we actually decided to go to G Suite to simplify stuff. And I also, I'm doubling down on a sauna, which is not cheap, so that we can communicate with each other better and get stuff done better. So yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes, I come from a different perspective. I think that the adventure race thing makes me less risk averse. We're spending money right now where it's going to make us more efficient, so that when we do open, he's talking about burn rate. I don't see a burn rate with ours. Like, as long as I know minimum we'll probably have 30% show up that day. And 30% of our members is a lot, happily for us. So, if they show up, we're not burning money. And if we have a few day passers, I'm not going to be marketing. Having that efficiency in place is a way bigger deal for us, because we'll be able to operate with less top-heavy admin and more, get more done faster and more responsively. So.
Okay.
I have a question for the panel, because we were talking about this in terms of expenses. What are your thoughts on the increase or management decrease of cleaning expenses, janitorial services? We've been talking about possibly having staff do some of that, but then there's also the scenario of like, okay, it's going to cost a lot more and we need to hire professionals to come in and do even a better job than before.
Yeah, and actually that's a great segue to the next question I had, which is just in general. So either on that topic or in general, are there additional expenses that you're planning on taking on once you do reopen? Whether that's more efficient tools that Kristen was mentioning, extra cleaning supplies, or staff, as Hillary was talking about.
I'll answer Hillary's question directly. We just met the other day about this, looking at how many staff we would bring back day one. Because again, our approach is going to be to open slow and hopefully ramp up quickly. And one of the comments was made, well, let's bring these staff that are unemployed in as the cleaners. There'll be plenty of cleaning services available if the economy is rocked as much as it appears to be. So it won't be any problem to rehire a cleaning service down the road. But that is a place that you can put some idle staff to work. So that's our thinking as a smaller operation. You know, really big buildings that need a big overnight cleaning crew, that's going to be a different story.
To pony on this, one of the things, because we have gyms in various states, cleaning costs are going to naturally go down if we have less traffic. So there's that piece. And then on top of that, when we closed, our front desk staff was pretty psyched on just being part of that. So, you know, like we have them cleaning like door handles and like the little stall handles and stuff like that. And they're psyched to do it. The people, what's interesting for us, which becomes problematic with that payment protection thing, most of our part-timers don't want to return. So we're going to be having full-time staff. So we're really involved in it. And so far, everybody's pretty psyched on that. And same thing with yoga. We're going to start training the yoga instructors as well as the people who are participating to clean themselves. So, you know, again, making it more smooth is kind of what we're doing. So cost-wise, I think our professional fees will go down just because nobody's there to make it chalky and gross. But we're going to make sure we hire people that are psyched to help us wherever we need to.
And then another big area of expense would be, you know, maintaining any of the debt that any of the gyms out there currently have, additional debt that's been added by the idle or PPP loans, and then however you negotiated any rent deferment that you were able to eke out. How have you guys gone about including those repayments and those expenses into your financial planning?
For me, I'm doing it month by month. So I know which debts are forgiven or deferred. And by the way, one quick, and I'm sorry if I may be insulting everybody else, but we discovered that with our SBA loans that you can get them deferred for 3 months and then you can get them forgiven for another 6. So we've been able to eliminate those for 9 months.
Okay. And so your financial planning then is at a monthly basis. Is that your general course of action, Joel, or a new shorter term?
I can kind of see month by month, and then we'll adjust it as we get into it, just to kind of keep forecasting out. Because I think a month after we open, we'll have a better sense as to what month 2, 3, and 4 look like based on the trends and the results we get at month 1.
Okay.
Yeah, in our situation on the debt side, one, if anybody hasn't talked to their lenders yet, they certainly are behind the curve. And I think most lenders are scrambling. Hopefully you have a good relationship. But SBA did automatically defer and forgive 6 months. So everybody that's got an SBA portion, whether it's a 504, I guess the 7A, maybe that's a better deal for some people, but whatever it is, that's a forgiven piece. And then you're just back to your normal monthly payment that you were used to. With our commercial lender, at this point, we've gotten 3 months of deferred principal and interest tacked to the end of the term. So if I'm still alive, then I'll deal with it in 15, 20 years. But that doesn't change our cash flow. So once we pass that period, if we're up and running, then I know exactly what my principal and interest payments are going to be. So talk to your lenders and negotiate hard. I think landlords are going to be a trickier deal because they want to be made whole in a quicker period. So does anybody have any success with landlords at this point?
I can speak to that. I actually have had great success with one specific one. I have 2 personal relationships with landlords who are just businessmen who happen to have buildings, and then we have one really large landlord who has like the most land on the West Coast, like millions of square feet. One of them was like, hey, you do what you need to do. The other one we never asked because we wanted to keep a relationship with him, and he's actually looking at investing in us for growth right now because he likes how we practice. And then the larger one, we had a big deposit down because they didn't believe in climbing gyms. And I finally was like, hey, look, what are we going to do about that? And she said, oh, you can't use it. And then I finally called her up and was like, look, you don't have late fees right now. You can't evict us. please, you're going to have to use your deposit. And she was like, that's totally cool. How can we help you? And so the perspective I'm getting out of this is that our landlords are trying to be cool because they want you back, but only because you're cool, if that makes sense. So getting ahead of that, communicating with people and saying like, look, like I recognize like my business guys, I checked in with them as soon as this happened and said, hey, this is a big deal. I don't want you to go under. And they're like, we're fine. And I'm like, great. So I would say through this, like when we're talking about or debt deferral, is communication is the key. I mean, even this big one that really has no power, she's like, no, I get it. What are we going to do? But I would not defer any of your debt if I would help, if you want to save yourself, because if you, I mean, yours is fine where it's like tacked on at the end. But if, you know, like I saw mortgage deferments where it was like, and then after 3 months you have a balloon, and it was like, you think you're stressed out now? Wait till everything's good, but then you go under. And that's the biggest piece, is that what's really going to happen is between the 12 to 24 month period where everybody finally thinks they're back, but then all of a sudden all this stuff comes and then everything's going to explode. So try to stress free yourself and by setting yourself up now and stress now, so that when you are open, you're just like, oh, thank God we're good.
Yeah, the early offers that we got were defer 3 months and then amortize that over the next 24. And that didn't make sense because, you know, I figured we were going to be closed close to 3 months, best case. And then all of a sudden we reopen with an even higher debt payment. That didn't float. And to tack onto what you just said, I think now's the time to sell those landlords on your business, because who the heck are they going to rent to, right? They don't have any prospects. So if you can convince them that you're a strong player coming out the other side, they're going to have to do something because they want long-term rent. And it sounds like that's what you've been able to do. Yeah.
So what sort of time period are you looking at for this analysis, for any of your cash flow analysis, Kristen? Are you on the monthly side of things like Joel, or are you more real time?
Kind of a combination. Happily, I guess the older I get, the less crusty I get about having to check every day. And it's kind of easy, right? Because we're still on the opt-out plan, so we know exactly how much money is coming in and then how much is going out, because there's nothing there. So I don't have to look and keep going back.
Okay.
I also have, like I said, I have that really robust spreadsheet. So I know in the next 10 years, with whatever scenario, whatever I plug in, it'll tell me what's going to happen. So I'm pretty relaxed about that. The thing that I'm tracking right now is payroll. So I have a separate spreadsheet, and it's real simple. It has like at each gym, what's the payroll? What was it when we closed? What, you know, like February, March, April, May, and I update it with the actuals, and then I estimate what it's going to go down to, and then I do fixed, and then I say what's the actual for fixed, because I'm like kind of everything at the gym, and so I don't have like someone who's just working on finances, so I'm never 100% sure what's coming in and out. So then I put the actual, and I go, oh, cool, okay, it's less, and then I go, okay, so that's what this is going to be. But my little spreadsheet goes out till June, and it's gone out till June since we've closed, because I do believe, you know, I wrote to our local government when we were all suffering, when we were like, do we close, do we not? And I said, can you just close us, because nobody's coming, and they're all scared, and it's creating all this drama and stress, like just close us. So they did. And, you know, I'm part of the West Coast Pact. And so, you know, I think it's 5 states now are all working together. So, and they're actually increasing restrictions with, I think the goal is so that they can open up sooner. And so I'm looking at end of June as like probably worst case scenario for us unless something happens. So that's where I'm looking at it now. But if it keeps going, I have this projection thing. I'll just keep adapting.
Okay. And do you see? Does anyone see their frequency of cash flow analysis changing after you do reopen and you're in that kind of startup rebuilding phase?
Yes, I mean, I think we're gonna, as we learn what the new behavior is of our customer base, we'll be adjusting and trying to tighten up those numbers a little bit based on, you know, now that we've got some actuals coming in.
Right. So I was also curious just to see what sorts of tools everyone out there is using for their accounting and for their analysis. Heard of a giant well-built spreadsheet from Kristen. Sure, a lot of people are using QuickBooks or you know, some sort of accounting software like that as well. Any other apps that you guys rely on or look to for making these kind of analyses?
Not for this. I'm the oldest person here probably on the call. So,
Oh, you definitely are.
yeah, thank you, Doug. Love you too, bro. So yeah, the personal computer was invented the year I graduated college. So, but all my stuff is in Excel, but then we use QuickBooks Online. There is one
And Joel, you're going to offer to share those QuickBook files through CWA, is that correct?
I'm not sure.
That was before you jumped on the
person.
That's what we had heard before you jumped on the call.
Okay. But we did transition, that's been really helpful for us, to an online payment platform that we moved all of our vendors to about a year ago called Bill.com. And everything's electronic. And most of our vendors take e-payments, but you scan in a bill and it's all done electronically. And that's something, like I said, we started about a year ago, and it's really changed the efficiency of how we operate.
I don't want to kill you, but I actually switched off of Bill.com because QuickBooks does it. QuickBooks Online does it for you. You don't have to pay for them. So just FYI. My bookkeeper set it up because she's amazing. That's one thing I will say is I think it's less app and more relationship. Like, this is the time to get great bankers who can, like, my banker looks at my spreadsheet and tells me if I'm missing something. And finding the best bookkeeper, like I have a full service bookkeeper who's actually a CPA too. And talking with them and spending the money on the CPA, and especially with the tracking, if you guys take the loans and making sure that it's put in the right place.
Right.
I was doing everything by myself until the new gyms opened and we became for-profit, because we were nonprofit before that. And oof, man, it was a mess doing it by yourself. So if you guys are fairly large and you're trying to deal with all this stuff, it's worth it to spend the money to find a really good partner and make sure that they're a good partner. And if you guys need help with that, contact me, because I've lost so much money and stressed out with bad partners.
All right. And on the member management side and pulling data out from that, are most of you guys on RGP? Any other suites out there that or ways that you use that data and import it into either your spreadsheets or financial planning that you found to be especially helpful?
We've been on RGP since 2010, so as far as we know, it's accomplishing everything we want out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on RGP as well.
All right.
I'm a mind-body person.
Mind-body?
But I don't think that they necessarily provide the tools you need as a special thing. It's just service.
Okay. And yeah, I wanted to leave some time as well just to talk about any of the unexpected opportunities that that we have going through this whole crisis. And starting from that tool standpoint, you had mentioned that you're ramping up your Asana implementation and getting your staff trained on it, Kristen. I know Joel had just launched has just launched a new retail online storefront for his gyms and his customers. Any other opportunities that you guys are seeing present themselves as you navigate this?
Well, just
go ahead, go Joel.
Like I say, just a quick backstory. I mean, all of our retail, food and drinks, I mean, we're aggressively trying to turn all that into cash as fast as we possibly can, because the old analogy, again, gas in the tank. I mean, I can buy shoes and harnesses and chalk bags at a later point in time, but converting all that stuff to give me more ability to maneuver and pivot and get through this is a high priority. So we've instructed our team to get rid of as much stuff as you possibly can as fast as you can.
I guess I'll answer that, and I'll say that's one of the things. So being member centered, we don't have a lot of retail, so that hasn't been an issue for me, and thank God right now. But with that, some opportunities that we're doing. So when we opened, we did a package because who are the people that are kind of not sure they want to do it? It's the month-to-month people. So we have a package that we're going to be opening with, which is that Friction Labs liquid chalk, that they're high alcohol liquid chalk, and a harness, because we want to encourage people to not have to rent their harnesses and touch all that stuff, right? And then we're going to be doing that with a free month of membership. So basically, like, get them the hardware, and they've already invested, and they're going to stay. We've done stuff like that in the past. We're thinking about doing it with yoga too, because we don't really want to have to deal with the props. And so having those packages, I had a 75% sign up rate for auto draw after somebody bought one of those. Stuff like that, where you're like, okay, look, like if someone's freaked out and they don't have their equipment, because we're kind of a low barrier to entry. Like, we have free rental shoes. We're trying not to put, we try to make it, we have like no initiation fees and stuff like that. So how do we help the people that are like squirrely right now that really want to get into it? The other thing is volunteers and scholarships. So there's a bunch of people that are going to come out of this, and they're not going to be able to afford a membership, right? Because there's a lot of people that are out of work, but they need the psych of the climbing gym, and you can use extra bodies. So we already have a robust volunteer program for this reason, and we're going to have them helping wash holds. We're going to have them helping clean stuff down. We're probably going to have them work as greeters. If the masks are required, we're going to have them, outside with a basket of masks. We're actually making custom masks with like, it's cute. It's like Hawaiian print logos of the stuff behind me, so that people will have like their own custom mask if they want to buy one that's like festive. And if not, we're going to have our staff use them. We actually have there. If you guys want to have PPE masks, like the surgical masks, thestudio.com has a unbroken, reliable chain of them. So if you need to buy some and you want to have them stocked at your gym, that's a really good thing to have. Beyond that, I've had developers and landlords coming out of the woodworks who have cash available, who want gyms in place. So it's really stressful for me, because I'm the one that works on what is and not what is in the future. But I've been having to run a lot of scenarios, because I've got a lot of opportunities where suddenly these landlords who had cash but they don't have anybody to take their buildings are asking, hey, do you want a climbing gym? Hey, can we make a deal? So I won't even have to go into debt to perhaps gain a couple climbing gyms out of this. And beyond that, like I was talking to that guy that does the flipping, and he says, again, think about 12 to 24 months out, rent's probably going to be really cheap, because everybody's going to be in a little depressed area. The people that are not going to survive, that's going to be empty. So the thing I'm going to say is that survive this period. But, I heard a lot of like survive. There are so many opportunities and ways to flex and change. And that, like, if you decide to lean into this and see that it's something that could be good for you. And so, like when we're closing, you talked about, oh yeah, we adopted Asana. Well, we're also like robust programming. We hired new people, and we promoted new people, and we shifted them around. And now we have these like amazing online training programs for my staff. They're like huge modules, so that they're like perfect and great. And then we have like input. So we're spending all this time to do all this amazing stuff, so that it's going to be cheaper, more efficient for us to keep doing it, and just like leaning into it that way. So figuring out your systems, like, take the time. You don't have the stress of all the members. You don't have the stress. You know exactly what's happening. So like, don't chill. Look for the opportunity, because there's absolutely an opportunity out there for you. Even if you're a little guy. If you're a little guy, this is great, because you don't have as much to lose as somebody who's got a ton of debt, because they've got a $10 million climbing gym that they have to pay off. So it sucks for everybody. Like, trust me, it's not like I'm all like happy all the time here. But ride the wave of like what you can and cannot do depending on what your situation is.
And I think likewise, Doug, you mentioned earlier you're looking at ways to make your operation more efficient and cost effective as well.
Well, sure. We've done a few things so far. We were on a pretty solid growth pattern, so we weren't being super careful around the edges, and we had some waste. So we went back now and we trimmed that fat out. So we'll be a little bit more efficient when we come back. So but that's a small step. I do think that I'm going to be spying on everybody in the industry. So I'll be on everybody's websites looking for their ideas, because everybody's going to come up with some new interesting idea. And then you figure out, hey, what would work in my scenario? Because not everything that everybody does is going to work for your particular business and your market, but there are going to be a lot of good ideas out there. And I think you need to be snooping, you need to be talking to people, you need to be looking at their websites, and whoa, that's a cool idea. So just something as simple as, when we come back with yoga, and that probably isn't day one for us, but when we come back, we will probably do a hybrid program where we'll have a certain number of people in the building. We'll have a Zoom feed going, members will have access codes to get on that. So you can take our yoga class from home, or you can take it in the studio. You know, another thing that we've looked at is because a lot of people are assuming that they're going to have limitations to their capacity, at least in the near term. So we've been not only playing with and trying to copy what some other people are doing with their reservation system ideas, but we're saying, how can we take that and apply that now to day passes? So we get these choke point periods where on a rainy Saturday, the gym is just overwhelmed. But if we can create more demand spread out over time through online sales. So we're looking at a reservation system now for day passes as well as memberships, trying to figure out how that'll work. And so anyway, and then we can avoid the contact at the front counter. We eliminate the having to touch the person's credit card. They've already prepaid. So there are a lot of things like that I think are out there. But I would say people are going to come up with some great ideas, figure out the ones that you can steal and run with them.
Yeah, I remember when I was in architecture school, there was a saying, and they said that bad designers copy, good ones borrow, and great ones steal.
Boom.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've got some interesting opportunities in just analyzing hours of operation and even your entire business plan, Hillary. Any other opportunities that you've seen to eke out?
Well, kind of to Doug's point, I wanted to just elaborate on that a little bit. Is I think that when we do re-enter into kind of society in this new world, I am guessing that there's going to be a lot more flexibility in people's schedules, and probably people are going to be able to work from home, and they're getting used to working from home. And so I'm wondering if we will be able to spread that load in the gym and not have this massive amount of people coming in like right at 5 o'clock, right? I mean, it could be a really great opportunity for this industry to encourage people to come in during the slower times, because they'll have more flexible schedules.
Yeah, we're always looking to fill those off hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starting at 5 o'clock on the weekdays, we run out of parking, we're jammed, we can't fit anybody else in the door. But at 11 in the morning, some gyms are busy, but no gym is as busy as they are at night. So yeah, if we can shift those people around, we can create even more capacity.
Can I speak to that for you guys? I actually have this in my business plan in general. I don't know if this is going to go, but we're actually developing early childhood parent participation programs based on climbing to open up like the 9 to 11 spot. And then what we actually do is we actively market to like stay-at-home parents and like in charter schools and stuff like that. We even have, obviously it depends, things will be a little bit different, but we even have a couple charter schools that use this for PE. So looking for opportunities for people who normally are actually free, because I think it's so hard. You could scattershot and be like, come on at like 2 o'clock, and they're like, great, I have a job. But you find the people that don't, and like when those, like as a mom of 4-year-old twins, you're looking for something to do. So like reaching those people is really good.
Does anyone have any concerns about the very long-term impacts of setting those kind of expectations for people, that at some distant point in the future, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, when you do have that opportunity for that really busy, crowded, rainy Saturday or 7 p.m. after work crowd, that people will be turned off from coming to the gym if it looks like that, since they've had now months or maybe even years of relatively like quiet alone time too.
I'll speak to that because we already had that problem before we got closed. Our gym is too small, and one of the opportunities we have before us is creating an expansion where we actually pull all the people I just talked about, the kids, recreational families and stuff, and we build a gym that's like kind of a Funtopia type gym, but we can also make it training for our coaching program, because our gym, like people go in and they're like, oh my God, all the kids are everywhere and we just want to climb at 4. So, like, again, it's an opportunity. Like, oh, you got too full, we'll figure it out and make a new business. And that's awesome.
Yeah. Anyone else with concerns, or just seeing that as Kristen does, as an opportunity to expand a little bit. Yeah. All right. So you got a couple of questions here, and then we're getting close to the end of the hour, so we'll wrap up pretty soon. Yeah, so yeah, some general questions here about pricing of those off-peak hours, whether, gyms obviously historically have played around with different pricing for off-peak to help drive customers. For any of you guys who are looking at activating those times with a reservation system or otherwise, are you looking at pricing or alternative pricing for different time periods? I guess this would be analogous to Uber's surge pricing, right?
We're not, but what if you charge more for off hours climbing and say there are only going to be 15 people in the building or 20 people in the building? We only have 20 spots and they're $4 more per session for Day Pass.
Yeah.
So, but we're not going to know till we know. So we just have to be open to all these things, and we have to be ready to move quickly as we see how our customers react.
Right.
I'm going to speak to the complete opposite of that, which is I have a retail background too. And one of the things I've learned is whatever your price point you set it at, that's the value of that experience. And if you artificially inflate a price or deflate a price, then it devalues or it overvalues it. And so that person at coming in at 11, if they feel like they're either worth more or less, when you go back to what you normally did, then that's a problem, especially if you've closed down and you open this up. You're going to have a lot of pushback, I would think, because you have a certain culture at your gym and they're not seeing it as a recreational value opportunity. They see it as a membership and they can come when they want to.
Right. And question here about inventory management. This might be a little bit detailed for this, but someone was wondering about whether you set up your online retail store to cooperate with RGP. Joel, you're muted, Joel. We'll just get you.
I'm sorry, Garnet. I'm not smart enough to tell you what they did because I don't know how they did it, but they just did it. Okay. But yeah, I know that they were syncing up things with RGP, but the mechanics of how they did it, I'm not smart enough to be able to explain that to you.
Yeah, and I'm sure that if you need help with that, get in contact with RGP. They'll do their best to answer your questions. And then probably the last question we have time for today. How do underage customers, children, roll into any of this financial planning? Are you looking at decreased participation in those groups, moving them online in some capacity for the short term? Any interesting insights around underage and youth climbing?
Well, for us, it looks like the phasing, the way the governor is going to open up the state, that we'll be able to open to members, and if we choose to, adult day passes. But the governor's put a kibosh on any organized youth activities until the last phase, which is when schools are open. Okay. So that's just a placeholder for us in the future. We have a pretty well-developed, we've been working on it for probably 10 years, youth programming, with all the things we do, try to fill the gyms during the day. But that for us is on hold until the governor gives us the green light to be able to do that. So we expect to go back to that. One thing is we have a pretty full schedule for our summer camps, which are obviously youth. And we did a calculation, and I would encourage all of you to do this. If you're precluded from running those things, what's the exposure from a refund standpoint to give those people's money back? And we are likely, I'll say 99% likely, that we're going to do what I guess Carnival Cruises did, or one of the cruise lines, that as opposed to giving you a cash refund, we'll give you a credit of 100 and 125% of what you paid us for a future booking, again, to conserve cash.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that insight. It's going to, I think we'll wrap up now since we're at the end, a little bit over time.
Can I answer that one question?
Yeah, go for it, Kristen.
Okay, yeah. So one thing on youth programs, one of the things that I'm looking at is if we're not allowed to congregate or they're going to be too impulsive, what we're going to continue, impulsive isn't the right word, too concentrated at the gym. One of the things that we're looking at is going to be continuing our online coaching. We actually have like straight up online coaching, like Zoom, and then we send out plans, and having them do it as an individual, and do it at a different time, not as a concentrated time, but still have the ability to access their coaches in that relationship. Because I feel like having grown up in youth sports, like that relationship is really important. So not keeping that paused as much as possible and allowing them to have somebody to check in with and to feel like they're part of a team still. For the younger age bracket, we're kind of approaching it, again, it depends on what the governors say and what the public health says. But, again, everybody should be equal at our gym. So we're not going to limit what the age is that shows up. I've got kids and they're 12, they're pulling down 513. And then I've got my like 4-year-olds who aren't licking all the holds. So there's no way to say, oh, look, let's just put this on this. You guys just want to have the money come in and then be as smart as you can about it and just keep adapting. So, yeah. Keep the kids there. They need it. Parents need it.
Great. Well, hopefully everyone here can join us on our next call on Tuesday. It'll be another brainstorming session like we've had for the past couple weeks. This time we're going to be focusing on some of the medium-term and long-term possibilities for our industry, just to try to get those thoughts flowing about what you can look forward to as we exit the pandemic, and what sorts of planning you might want to be doing to be ready for those different possibilities. And then we'll announce our topic for Thursday probably early next week. So thanks everyone for joining us today. As always, you can get in touch with any of the staff here at the CWA with any of these questions. I just want to say a thank you again to our panelists for joining and sharing their experiences and their plans. And you can find a recording of this webinar if you want to share it with people at our climbingwallindustry.org/coronavirus page. And we'll continue to update that with more and more resources as they're developed. So thanks again to our panelists, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you on the next call.